My name is Jacob Williams, 68 years old from Boston. I never thought I would stand alone at my wife Martha's funeral, while our 3 children divided her $37 million empire between them. Thomas, Sophia, and Amanda sneered as the lawyer handed me a dusty envelope while they received deeds to luxury properties, keys to exotic cars, and control of vast investments. They mocked me openly as I clutched that simple paper package. None of us knew that its contents would change everything forever. Where are you watching from today? If you value family loyalty, hit subscribe now. The story of what happened next will make you completely rethink what inheritance truly means. I grew up in a blue-collar neighborhood in South Boston during the early 50s. My father worked at the docks, and my mother cleaned houses for wealthy families across town. They taught me the value of honest work and integrity above all else. I carried those lessons through my life, even when they seemed to put me at a disadvantage. I met Martha at Danny's Diner in 1975. She was waiting tables to pay her way through business school at Boston University. I was 20 years old, working my first construction job, and completely captivated by her sharp mind and determined spirit. Martha had this way of talking about the future that made you believe anything was possible. When she discussed business concepts, her eyes lit up with a fire I had never seen before. We married in 1977, in a modest ceremony at my parents' church. Our first apartment was in a struggling part of town, a one-bedroom walk-up with temperamental plumbing and neighbors who argued through paper-thin walls. Martha would study at the kitchen table late into the night after her shifts, while I picked up extra construction jobs on weekends to support us. One day, Jake, she would tell me with absolute certainty, "We are going to build something extraordinary together." I believed her completely. While Martha finished her business degree, I worked my way up to foreman at Bradford Construction. The hours were long, and the work broke my body a little more each year, but it provided steady income while Martha developed her vision. The first hint of her business genius came 3 years into our marriage, when she convinced me to use our small savings to purchase a dilapidated duplex in an overlooked neighborhood. Everyone thought we were crazy. My father called it throwing good money after bad. But Martha had noticed small changes in the area, a new bus route, plans for a community center, little things others missed. We spent weekends fixing that duplex together, Martha right beside me hanging drywall and painting walls despite having no construction experience. 6 months later, we sold it for nearly double our investment. That was just the beginning. Thomas, our firstborn, arrived in 1980. Martha was back at work within 2 weeks, already searching for our next investment property, a baby carrier strapped to her chest during property viewings. Sophia followed 2 years later, and Amanda 3 years after that. As Martha's business ventures grew more ambitious, we made a decision that seemed natural at the time. I would scale back my construction work to become the primary caregiver for our children, while Martha pursued her rapidly expanding business interests. It made financial sense, as her potential earnings far outpaced mine. And honestly, I loved being there for our kids in a way my own father never could be for me. The turning point in Martha's career came when she spotted a condemned commercial building downtown. Where others saw an eyesore destined for demolition, Martha saw potential. Using the profits from our previous ventures and a loan I co-signed, by putting my construction equipment up as collateral, she purchased the building and orchestrated a complete renovation. That project became the headquarters of Williams Property Development. Within 10 years, Martha's company grew from that single building to a significant player in Boston real estate. Within 20 years, it expanded to multiple states. By our 30th anniversary, Martha Williams was managing a diversified real estate and investment empire worth over $30 million. Each of our children developed distinct personalities as they grew. Thomas, our oldest, showed his mother's ambition and analytical mind from an early age. He calculated everything, from the allowance he received to the time spent on activities, always looking for maximum return on investment. Martha saw herself in him and took special pride in his accomplishments. Sophia, our middle child, inherited her mother's creativity, but channeled it differently. She had an eye for design and beauty, always rearranging her room or sketching new fashion ideas. However, she also developed an expensive taste early on, equating quality with cost in a way that worried me. Amanda, our youngest, was sweet and sensitive initially. She loved animals and wanted to help everyone. But as she watched her older siblings compete for attention and recognition, she gradually became the most entitled of the three, expecting rewards without effort. Our early family life was filled with traditions I cherished. Sunday dinners were mandatory no matter how busy everyone became. Summer vacations to Cape Cod let us reconnect away from ringing phones and business emergencies. For years, the children seemed to appreciate these moments together as much as I did. But as Martha's business demands grew, she attended fewer school events and missed more family dinners. The children noticed. They began comparing our roles, seeing their mother conquering the business world while their father remained focused on home and family. The subtle shift in their respect happened so gradually, I barely noticed it beginning. Thomas started referring to me as just Dad around his friends, while Martha became my mother, the CEO. Sophia began asking Martha for fashion advice, instead of showing me her designs as she used to. Amanda stopped coming to me with her problems altogether. I told myself it was just a phase, that they would eventually see value in both the success their mother created and the stable home I maintained. I believed that once they matured, they would understand that building a family required different kinds of strength. On our 35th anniversary, Martha surprised me with a Patek Philippe watch I would never have bought for myself. Too extravagant, I thought, but the inscription on the back brought tears to my eyes. Time spent with you is my greatest fortune. That night, surrounded by our grown children in the grand house Martha's success had provided, I believed we had achieved the perfect balance. I was wrong. The real changes began when our children returned from college. Thomas graduated from Wharton with an MBA, immediately pushing to join Williams Property Development. Martha created an executive position for him, delighted to have her son follow in her footsteps. Within months, he was pushing for aggressive expansion, often dismissing the community-focused approach Martha had always valued. "Mom, sentimentality costs money," I overheard him saying during a strategy meeting I was not invited to attend. "We need to maximize shareholder value, not worry about whether longtime tenants can afford rent increases." Sophia returned from Parsons School of Design with connections to New York fashion circles and expensive tastes that had only grown during her education. Rather than start at entry-level positions like other graduates, she launched her own boutique fashion line, funded entirely by Martha's money. When I suggested she might gain valuable experience working for established designers first, she rolled her eyes. "Dad, that is so old school. Mom understands how the modern world works." Amanda, after changing majors 3 times, graduated with a communications degree she never used. Instead, she bounced between expensive hobbies, from competitive horseback riding to gourmet cooking classes in Paris, all funded by her mother's seemingly limitless resources. I tried to teach them about saving, about working their way up, about earning respect rather than demanding it. But my lessons were consistently undermined by Martha's generosity. She couldn't say no to them, especially as her own childhood had been marked by financial struggle. "They won't have to fight for everything the way we did, Jake," she would say when I expressed concern. "Isn't that what we worked for?" As the children established their adult lives, Martha worked longer hours than ever, expanding the business into commercial real estate development across the Northeast. She traveled frequently, sometimes gone for weeks at a time. I maintained our family home, now a sprawling colonial in Brookline, and tried to organize holiday gatherings that the children increasingly found reasons to miss. "Sorry, Dad. Thomas scheduled an investors meeting on Christmas Eve. I can't make Thanksgiving, Daddy. Fashion Week preparations. Easter brunch? I'll be in Aspen with friends." The first major health scare happened when Martha was 58. She collapsed during a board meeting from exhaustion and dehydration, having worked 90 hours that week while fighting off the flu. The doctor ordered complete rest for at least 2 weeks. I canceled everything to care for her, setting up a comfortable recovery space in our bedroom, preparing her favorite meals, and monitoring her medication. The children's visits during her recovery were brief and focused mainly on business matters rather than their mother's well-being. Thomas brought contracts for her to review. Sophia discussed funding for her next collection. Amanda barely came at all, sending elaborate flower arrangements instead. For Martha's 60th birthday, I planned for weeks, arranging a private celebration at the restaurant where we had our first date, now an upscale establishment she had actually helped finance. I invited close friends and family, asked the chef to prepare her favorite dishes, and even arranged for a string quartet to play songs from our early years together. Only Thomas showed up among our children, arriving 45 minutes late and spending most of the evening on phone calls in the restaurant lobby. Martha's smile never faltered, but I caught the disappointment in her eyes when she blew out her candles, surrounded by business associates rather than family. "They're just busy, Jake," she said later that night, building their own lives. But I had overheard Thomas on the phone with his sisters earlier. "It's just a birthday. Mom understands we have priorities." The next morning, I called each of our children separately. "Your mother missed you last night," I told Sophia. "Dad, I had a major meeting with buyers. Mom knows business comes first." "Amanda, 60 is a milestone birthday. Your mother was hurt you didn't come." "I sent a really expensive arrangement, Dad. The florist said it was their most exclusive design. Besides, we'll see Mom at Christmas." But Christmas came and went with only a brief appearance from the children, arriving late and leaving early for various social engagements. Finally, I confronted all three during a rare family dinner, asking directly why they couldn't make time for the people who had given them everything. "We're busy with important things," Thomas responded defensively, "building on the legacy Mom created." "That legacy isn't just about money," I argued. "It's about the values that helped us build everything in the first place." Martha interrupted before the conversation could escalate further. "That's enough, Jake. The children are adults with their own priorities." That night, for the first time in our marriage, Martha and I argued bitterly about our children. "You're enabling behavior that's destroying the people they could become," I said. "You're refusing to see that they're finding their own paths," she countered. "Paths that lead them further from everything we tried to teach them." Martha slept in the guest room that night. The distance growing between us mirrored the increasing isolation I felt from the family I had dedicated my life to nurturing. The diagnosis came without warning. Martha had gone for a routine physical, complaining of mild fatigue she attributed to a heavy travel schedule. The doctor called 2 days later, his voice carefully neutral as he requested we come in for a consultation. Stage 4, pancreatic cancer. Aggressive. Terminal. The specialist gave her 6 months, possibly a year, with aggressive treatment. Martha sat perfectly still as the doctor outlined options, her face composed in the same expression she used during difficult business negotiations. I felt my world collapsing. That evening, after telling the children over a hastily arranged dinner, Martha and I sat alone in our bedroom. "I'll fight this with everything I have," she promised, her voice steady. "But there are things I need to put in order, regardless of outcome." I immediately stepped down from the community board positions I had taken on over the years and devoted myself to being Martha's full-time caregiver. I accompanied her to every appointment, researched treatment options late into the night, and administered medications on precise schedules. The children reacted differently to the news. Thomas immediately focused on business continuity, scheduling meetings with Martha's executive team to discuss leadership transition. Sophia cried dramatically for an afternoon, then flew to Milan the next day for a fashion event she deemed impossible to cancel. Amanda posted tearful updates on social media, garnering sympathy from her followers while rarely visiting in person. Martha began an aggressive treatment protocol at Dana-Farber Cancer Center. I slept in a chair beside her during 3-day chemotherapy sessions, brought her favorite books to pass the time, and held her hair back when she was violently ill afterward. Through it all, Martha maintained her dignity and determination. The children's visits during treatment were infrequent and uncomfortable, They shifted nervously in the sterile hospital environment, clearly eager to leave. 3 weeks into treatment, I stepped out to get coffee and returned to overhear Thomas and Sophia in Martha's room, speaking in hushed tones while she slept. "The Beacon Hill properties should definitely come to me," Thomas was saying. "They align with my portfolio strategy. As long as I get the Hamptons house and the art collection," Sophia replied. "Amanda can have the liquid assets. She never appreciated real estate anyway." I stood frozen outside the door, coffee growing cold in my hand, as my children divided their mother's assets, while she fought for her life mere feet away. Martha declined rapidly over the next 6 months despite the treatments. The vibrant, unstoppable woman I married faded before my eyes, her body betraying the fierce was still evident in her gaze. I slept in a chair by her hospital bed every night, afraid to leave in case these precious final moments slipped away while I was gone. During a rare moment of privacy, when her pain medication had given her clarity without too much discomfort, Martha reached for my hand. "I've been blind, Jacob," she whispered, using my full name as she rarely did. "I thought I was giving them advantages, but I was taking away their chance to become people we could be proud of." "Don't think about that now," I urged, but she shook her head. "I've been meeting with Lawrence," she continued, referring to our family attorney and one of her oldest friends. "I'm making things right, as much as I can." I noticed her private meetings with Lawrence over the following weeks, the hushed conversations that ended when I entered the room. The documents quickly slipped into briefcases. When I asked what they were discussing, Martha squeezed my hand. "Trust me one last time, Jake. I need to do this my way." As Martha's condition worsened, the children's attention remained divided. On what would prove to be her final night, they had all accepted invitations to the annual Builders Association Charity Gala, an event Martha had always headlined in previous years. "You should go," Martha had told them from her hospice bed that morning. "Represent the family." I knew she was sparing them the reality of what was coming. I knew she was giving them an out they didn't deserve, and I knew from the relief in their eyes that they were going to take it. That night, as the symphony of medical equipment marked the slowing rhythms of Martha's body, I held her hand and talked about our early days, the dreams we had shared, the family we had built. "The envelope," she whispered suddenly, her eyes focusing on me with surprising clarity. "Lawrence will give it to you. It will explain everything." "What envelope?" I asked, leaning closer to hear her fading voice. "Promise you'll open it alone. Promise you'll trust me. One last time." "I promise," I said, confused but unwilling to cause her any distress. "I've always trusted you." She smiled then, the full, brilliant smile that had first captured my heart decades ago. "You were always the true strength behind everything we built, Jacob. I'm sorry it took me so long to see that." Martha slipped away at 2:17 in the morning, her hand still in mine, her children absent until I called with the news they claimed to have been dreading. The tone in Thomas's voice when he answered suggested I had interrupted something festive. In the background, I could hear music and laughter. "Dad, is everything okay? Your mother is gone," I said, my voice hollow. There was a pause, the background noise fading, as he presumably stepped away from the gala. "I see. We'll be there first thing in the morning to discuss funeral arrangements. Not to grieve, not to say goodbye, to discuss arrangements." I sat alone with Martha's body until dawn, saying my own goodbye to the remarkable woman who had been my partner for 43 years. Boston Cathedral was filled beyond capacity for Martha Williams's funeral. Business leaders, politicians, and society figures occupied the front rows, all claiming special relationships with the deceased. I sat alone in the family section, our children choosing to sit with business associates and fashion industry contacts rather than with their grieving father. The cathedral's soaring architecture, normally so inspiring, felt cold and impersonal for the farewell to a woman whose true warmth had been known to so few. Crystal vases of Martha's favorite orchids lined the altar, their perfect symmetry and controlled beauty a fitting tribute to her public persona, if not her private heart. Thomas delivered a carefully crafted eulogy, focusing on his mother's business acumen, philanthropic contributions, and lasting legacy in the real estate world. He spoke of continuing her vision and building on her foundation, phrases that sounded more appropriate for a corporate annual meeting than a son's farewell to his mother. When it was my turn to speak, I abandoned the notes I had prepared. Instead, I spoke simply about the Martha few had known, the woman who had once stayed up all night to finish sewing Thomas's Halloween costume, the wife who brought soup to construction sites when I was working in bad weather, the mother who never missed a dance recital until work began taking precedence over family. My words seemed to float away in the cavernous space, barely acknowledged by the assembly of people who had come to honor the business icon rather than the woman. As I returned to my seat, I noticed several of Martha's oldest employees wiping away tears, while our children checked their watches. The reception at our family estate became a networking event, with Thomas holding court in Martha's study, discussing transition plans with board members. Sophia showcased her latest designs to fashion editors in attendance, using her mother's funeral as a promotional opportunity. Amanda flitted between social groups, collecting condolences like souvenirs. I retreated to the bedroom Martha and I had shared, seeking a moment of peace among the swarm of people who had invaded our home. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I held a framed photo of our 30th anniversary, the last vacation, where we had truly connected as a family before the children's adult ambitions took precedence. Through the door left slightly ajar, I overheard Amanda speaking to an interior designer in the hallway. Now we can finally update this place. Mom had such outdated taste. I'm thinking complete renovation, starting with knocking out that wall to create an open concept main floor. I placed the photo back on the nightstand, a heaviness settling in my chest that had nothing to do with grief and everything to do with the realization that my children viewed their mother's death primarily as an opportunity for acquisition. The reading of the will was scheduled for 10 o'clock the following morning at Lawrence Peterson's downtown office. I spent a sleepless night in our empty house, surrounded by memories made hollow by the knowledge that I alone seemed to value them. Lawrence's office occupied the top floor of a building Martha had actually developed 15 years earlier. The conference room offered panoramic views of Boston Harbor, the water sparkling under unusually bright January sunshine. Lawrence greeted me with a warm handshake and unexpected words. Martha was very specific about today, Jacob. Whatever happens, remember that she knew exactly what she was doing. Before I could ask what he meant, my children arrived as a unified front, dressed impeccably in designer mourning attire, expressions appropriately solemn until the door closed behind them. Then the mask slipped, revealing the anticipation beneath. "Let's get this done," Thomas said, checking his Patek Philippe watch, identical to the one Martha had given me. "I have a board meeting at noon." Lawrence adjusted his glasses and began reading in a formal tone that grew increasingly uncomfortable as the distribution became clear. To Thomas James Williams, Martha left controlling interest in Williams Development Group's commercial division, 3 luxury properties in Boston and New York, and her collection of rare automobiles valued at approximately $12 million. To Sophia Elizabeth Williams, Martha bequeathed the vacation homes in the Hamptons and Aspen, her extensive art collection, and a portfolio of retail properties in Manhattan's Fashion District, with a combined value of approximately $11 million. To Amanda Marie Williams, Martha left her investment portfolios, the London apartment, and several fully paid insurance policies, totaling approximately $14 million. With each bequest, my children's expressions grew more triumphant, exchanging satisfied glances as their inheritance was detailed. The family home was to be shared equally among them, with the stipulation that I could continue living there for a period not exceeding 6 months. Lawrence paused, shuffling his papers before continuing. "And to my beloved husband, Jacob William Williams, I leave this envelope, to be opened privately, and whose contents are not subject to disclosure under the terms of this will." The room fell silent as Lawrence withdrew a worn manila envelope from his briefcase and handed it across the table to me. It was sealed with red wax bearing Martha's personal insignia, the paper itself slightly yellowed with age. Thomas's face twisted into something between a smirk and a sneer. That's it? 43 years of marriage, and she leaves you an envelope? Guess she knew who really built the empire, he added, not bothering to lower his voice. Pathetic, Sophia whispered, already scrolling through interior designers on her phone, presumably for the Hamptons house she'd just inherited. Amanda didn't even attempt to hide her reaction, openly laughing before asking Lawrence, "Is the Cartier jewelry collection included in my portion, or Sophia's? Mom always said I looked better in diamonds." I clutched the envelope, its insignificant weight a stark contrast to the massive wealth just distributed to my children. My throat tightened with humiliation as I struggled to reconcile the Martha I had loved with this final public dismissal. Lawrence attempted to catch my eye, seemingly wanting to communicate something, but Thomas interrupted with detailed questions about the transition of corporate control. "Dad, you might want to start packing," Sophia said casually. "Amanda and I are thinking of listing the house by March. The spring market will be hot." I stood abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against hardwood flooring. Without a word, I walked out, the envelope clutched in my trembling hand, leaving behind the children who seemed to have forgotten I existed now that the assets had been distributed. My last glimpse as the door closed was of Lawrence watching me with an unreadable expression, something like anticipation in his usually impassive legal gaze. I drove aimlessly through Boston's streets for hours, radio silent, mind racing with conflicting emotions. Betrayal warred with confusion, grief tangled with humiliation. The envelope sat on the passenger seat, seemingly innocent, yet somehow ominous in its potential. Eventually, I found myself parking near Jamaica Pond, where Martha and I had our first real date, walking around the water on a crisp autumn day in 1975. We had been so young, so full of dreams, neither of us could fully articulate yet. I had brought a thermos of hot chocolate and apologized for not taking her somewhere fancier. She had laughed and said perfect moments couldn't be bought. I sat on our favorite bench, now weathered by decades of New England seasons, and held the envelope in my hands. The afternoon sun was beginning its descent, casting long shadows across the partially frozen pond surface. A few hardy joggers circled the path, breath visible in the cold January air. Memories flooded unbidden. Martha pregnant with Thomas, discussing name options on this very bench, teaching Sophia to ride a bike on the flat path surrounding the water. Amanda feeding ducks despite the posted signs asking visitors not to. Family picnics in summer, ice skating in winter. Then later, the increasingly rare moments when Martha could escape work long enough for us to reconnect in this place that had always felt sacred to our relationship. With hands that refused to remain steady, I finally broke the wax seal and opened the envelope. Inside, I found 3 items: a handwritten letter several pages long, a small ornate key I didn't recognize, and a USB drive labeled simply Truth. I unfolded the letter, immediately recognizing Martha's distinctive handwriting, precise yet flowing. As I began reading, I could hear her voice as clearly as if she sat beside me. "My dearest Jacob, if you're reading this, I've failed in the most important ways possible. Not in business, where the world believes I succeeded, but in the only metrics that truly matter: raising children of character and honoring the gift of your unwavering love. I watched our children become people I don't recognize and, worse, don't particularly like. Thomas's ruthless ambition, Sophia's empty materialism, Amanda's entitled detachment. These are my failures, not yours. You tried to warn me for years, and I refused to listen. My success destroyed their character because I made the unforgivable mistake of giving without requiring effort, praising without demanding integrity, and valuing achievement over compassion. In short, I abandoned the very values you embodied every day of our marriage. What you're experiencing today, the will reading, our children's behavior, your apparent disinheritance, is my final test for them, and I'm certain they've failed it spectacularly. Here's the truth the children don't know. The assets they've been given today come with conditions none of them would have accepted had they been disclosed. The key enclosed opens a safe deposit box at First Boston Trust, containing documentation of the actual ownership structure of everything I built. 6 months ago, when my diagnosis clarified how little time I had left, I restructured our entire business empire. The controlling interest in Williams Development Group and all subsidiary companies now belongs to you, Jacob, through an irrevocable trust in your name. The properties, cars, portfolios, and assets our children believe they've inherited outright are actually controlled by this trust. Their ownership is conditional upon your approval of how they manage these assets, how they conduct themselves in business, and most importantly, how they honor the values that should have been their true inheritance. They can be removed from ownership at your discretion if they fail to demonstrate ethical business practices, community responsibility, and basic human decency. Lawrence has all legal documentation prepared. I know this approach seems manipulative, perhaps even cruel, but I needed to see their true colors when they thought you had nothing. I needed them to reveal themselves fully before any chance at redemption could begin. Only by hitting bottom can they perhaps begin to climb back toward becoming people we could be proud of. You, my love, are the only person I trust with this responsibility. Your integrity never wavered, even when it would have been easier to join me in indulging their worst impulses. Your moral compass remained true when mine lost direction in the fog of ambition. I'm so deeply sorry, Jacob. Sorry for the public humiliation you endured today. Sorry for prioritizing empire building over family nurturing. Sorry for not listening when you tried to correct my course. Most of all, I'm sorry for leaving you with this burden of trying to salvage what remains of our family's soul. Use this power wisely but firmly. Our children need boundaries they've never had. They need consequences they've never faced. Most of all, they need the example you've always set of quiet strength, unwavering principles, and genuine compassion. Whether you choose to reveal the truth immediately or wait to see if they can find their way back to decency on their own, I trust your judgment completely. The man who stood beside me when we had nothing is the only one I trust with everything. All my love, for all eternity. Martha. P.S. The USB drive contains video messages for each of our children, to be shared only when you believe they're ready to hear hard truths from beyond the grave. I read the letter twice more as the sun disappeared below the Boston skyline, the pond's surface now reflecting city lights rather than blue sky. Tears tracked silently down my face, not just for Martha or myself, but for the children who had lost their way so completely that this elaborate scheme had seemed necessary to their mother. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and called Lawrence. Jacob, he answered immediately. Are you all right? Is it true? I asked, my voice barely recognizable even to myself. Everything in her letter? Every word, Lawrence confirmed. We can meet first thing tomorrow at the bank if you'd like to access the safe deposit box. There's much more to discuss. The children have no idea? None whatsoever. Martha was explicit that they should believe you received nothing. She wanted to see how they would treat you when they thought you were powerless. I closed my eyes, remembering the sneers, the dismissive comments, the casual cruelty displayed just hours ago. They failed her test. Spectacularly, Lawrence agreed, echoing Martha's prediction. The question now is what you want to do about it. I looked at the letter once more, at Martha's familiar handwriting, at her final gift disguised as rejection. I'll meet you at the bank at 8 tomorrow morning, I decided. Tonight, I need to think. I returned home late that evening to find the house transformed. Staff I didn't recognize moved through the rooms, cataloging artwork and furniture. In Martha's office, Thomas was already seated at her desk, Sophia and Amanda arguing over which of them would get her collection of designer handbags. They barely acknowledged my entrance, Amanda offering a distracted, "Oh, hi, Dad," before returning to her claim that she had always admired a particular Hermes Birkin more than Sophia had. I quietly retreated to our bedroom, finding some comfort in the fact that they hadn't started dismantling this most private space yet. I placed Martha's letter in the drawer of my nightstand. next to the watch she had given me years ago. For the first time since her diagnosis, I slept through the night, Martha's words providing a strange comfort and clarity that had been missing for months. In my dreams, she sat beside me on that bench by Jamaica Pond, young again, laughing about our shared secret and the reckoning that was about to come. The next morning dawned clear and cold, the kind of crisp January day that Martha always said made her feel more alive. I dressed carefully in the suit I had worn to our last anniversary dinner, the one Martha had said made me look distinguished despite my construction worker's frame. Lawrence met me at First Boston Trust precisely at 8, his expression professionally neutral but with an undercurrent of anticipation. We were escorted to the private vault area by a manager who clearly recognized Lawrence, but regarded me with curiosity. The safe deposit box opened with the ornate key Martha had left in the envelope. Inside, I found exactly what her letter had promised: certificates of ownership, digital records on another USB drive, account information for offshore trusts, and a comprehensive legal overview of the control structure Martha had created. Back in Lawrence's office, surrounded by documents spread across his conference table, the full scope of Martha's plan became clear. You effectively control 51% of Williams Development Group and all subsidiary companies, Lawrence explained. The children received non-controlling interests that appear substantial, but are actually subject to your approval on all major decisions. And they have no idea? None. The documents they received yesterday outline their inheritance, but conveniently omit the trust structure and contingencies. Legally defensible, I assure you, as the complete terms are registered with the court and referenced by code in the will documents. What are my options? I asked, still processing the enormous responsibility Martha had placed on my shoulders. Entirely up to you, Lawrence said. You could reveal everything immediately. You could wait and observe how they handle what they believe they've been given. You could begin exercising control without explaining the source. Martha deliberately left those choices to your discretion. I spent the next week in seclusion, reviewing files Martha had left, studying the business she had built, and watching my children move forward with their plans as if I didn't exist. They had already begun boxing my personal belongings, casually discussing which guest room I might use temporarily until I found someplace more suitable. Thomas announced a major company restructuring that would eliminate the positions of several employees who had been with Martha since the beginning, including her loyal assistant Marion, who had often watched the children when they were young. Outdated skill sets, he explained to the board. We need digital natives and forward thinkers. The final straw came when I overheard him on the phone with a developer known for replacing affordable housing with luxury condominiums, discussing the fate of Martha's first major commercial property, which currently housed a community center she had founded. The sentimentality ends now, Thomas said. That location is prime real estate being wasted on programs that generate no revenue. I knew then that waiting longer would only allow more damage to be done to Martha's legacy. The following morning, I arrived at Williams Development Group headquarters, 15 minutes before the scheduled board meeting to approve Thomas's restructuring plan. Marion looked up in surprise as I entered the executive floor. Mr. Williams, it's so good to see you, she said, genuine warmth in her greeting. I'm so sorry about Martha. We all miss her terribly. Thank you, Marion. I understand today might be difficult for you and others. Her expression confirmed she knew about the planned layoffs. We all knew changes would come eventually. Thomas has different priorities than his mother. The boardroom fell silent when I walked in, executives exchanging uncomfortable glances. Thomas looked up from his presentation notes with barely concealed annoyance. Dad, this is a private meeting. I can have Marion call you a car if you need to get somewhere. Actually, I'm exactly where I need to be, I replied, taking a seat at the head of the table, Martha's former position. Thomas's irritation shifted to embarrassment, as he apparently worried I might cause a scene. We're about to start a very important meeting. Perhaps we can catch up later for coffee. The door opened again, admitting Lawrence with a leather portfolio under his arm. The board members looked confused by the family attorney's arrival at what was supposed to be an internal business meeting. Perfect timing, Lawrence, I said calmly. Please, distribute the documents. Thomas stood abruptly. What is this? We have an agenda to follow. Lawrence methodically placed folders in front of each board member. This is now the agenda, Thomas. Your father has some important information to share. As the board members opened their folders, expressions of shock, confusion, and in some cases relief spread around the table. This isn't possible, Thomas sputtered, scanning the documents. There's been a mistake. No mistake, Lawrence confirmed. Your father is now the controlling shareholder of Williams Development Group and all subsidiary companies. These documents outline the trust structure your mother established before her death. I never agreed to this. Thomas's face had turned an alarming shade of red. You weren't asked to agree, I said quietly. These are the actual terms of your mother's will, beyond what was shared yesterday. Turning to the stunned board members, I continued with more confidence than I felt. My first act as controlling shareholder is to table the proposed restructuring plan. No employee terminations will occur at this time. The relief on several faces was immediate and profound. You can't do this, Thomas insisted, though his voice held less certainty now. I'm the CEO. Actually, Lawrence interjected, you're the CEO subject to board approval, which requires your father's consent as majority shareholder. Thomas stormed out, already dialing on his phone, likely calling the high-priced attorneys he kept on retainer. I continued the meeting, assuring the board that while changes might come, they would honor Martha's commitment to both profitable operations and community responsibility. By the time I returned home that afternoon, all three children had assembled in the living room, their expressions varying from Thomas's outright hostility to Sophia's calculation to Amanda's confusion. You lied to us, Thomas accused as soon as I walked in. You let us believe you got nothing, while secretly taking control of everything. I didn't lie. I corrected him. I received exactly what was stated in the will reading. An envelope. The contents of that envelope revealed what your mother had actually done with her assets. This is contestable, Sophia stated. We've already spoken with attorneys. Lawrence, who had arrived with me, shook his head. I assure you it's not. Martha was very thorough. The trust is irrevocable, established months ago when she was clearly of sound mind, and the conditional nature of your inheritance is legally binding. What conditions? Amanda asked, speaking for the first time. I explained everything, how their inheritance was contingent on my approval of how they conducted themselves in business and personal matters, how they could be removed from ownership if they failed to demonstrate ethical business practices and basic human decency. This is emotional blackmail, Thomas spat, and completely unnecessary. We're adults who don't need our father's approval of our business decisions. Your behavior since your mother's diagnosis suggests otherwise, I replied calmly. You've demonstrated exactly why she structured things this way. I'm calling Julian, Sophia said, referring to her attorney. This can't be legal. Before you waste billable hours, Lawrence advised. Understand that Martha consulted with the top trust attorneys in the country to ensure this would withstand any challenge. Your mother was nothing, if not meticulous. I looked at my children, really looked at them, seeing both the entitled adults they'd become and glimpses of the children they had once been. I'm offering you a choice, I said finally. Work with me to restore the values that built this family and this company, or fight me and risk losing everything. Your mother believed you could find your way back to becoming people she could be proud of. I want to believe that too. This is emotional manipulation, Thomas insisted. No, I corrected him. This is a consequence of your own behavior. How you treated your mother during her illness. How you treated me after her death. How you immediately planned to dismantle her legacy for quick profits. The silence that followed was heavy, with unspoken accusations and painful truths. I need time to think, Amanda said finally, the first reasonable response from any of them. Take all the time you need, I replied. I'm not going anywhere. Thomas stormed out, followed quickly by Sophia. Only Amanda lingered, looking uncertainly between me and the door before finally following her siblings. The next morning, I arrived at Martha's office early and began familiarizing myself with operations. Many employees seemed relieved to see me, especially when I announced that the planned terminations were canceled. Within days, I discovered numerous decisions Thomas had already set in motion: slashing benefits, canceling community programs Martha had championed, even plans to sell historically significant properties to developers known for razing old buildings. I reversed what I could and established new approval protocols for others. Thomas fought me at every turn, filing legal challenges that Lawrence easily deflected. Sophia withdrew completely, focusing on her fashion business while avoiding family contact. Amanda maintained distance, but occasionally texted to ask about specific decisions. After 3 weeks of open warfare, I found an unexpected visitor in the kitchen one morning. Amanda, making coffee and looking uncomfortable. "I've been thinking," she said without preamble, "about what Mom did." At first I was angry, but then I remembered something. She hesitated, stirring her coffee unnecessarily. The last time I visited her in the hospital, when I thought she was asleep, she opened her eyes and said, "A life without purpose is no life at all." I thought it was the medication talking, but now I wonder if she was trying to tell me something. "Your mother worried about all of you," I said carefully. "Not about your success, but about your happiness." "I'm not happy, Dad," Amanda admitted, her voice small. "I have all these things, but I don't have anything that matters." It was the first genuine conversation I'd had with any of my children in years. "Would you show me what you're doing at the company?" she asked. Not to interfere, just to understand. That afternoon, Amanda accompanied me to the office, listening attentively as I explained Martha's original vision and how it balanced profit with purpose. I showed her the community center Thomas had planned to close, introduced her to employees who had known her since childhood, and watched as something shifted in her expression. "I had no idea Mom did all this," she admitted. "Thomas only ever talked about revenue and market share." "Your mother built something remarkable," I told her. "Not just profitable, but meaningful." Over the following weeks, Amanda began coming to the office regularly. Initially, just observing, but gradually asking questions and offering suggestions. Her background in communications proved valuable in articulating Martha's vision to employees and partners. Sophia returned next, reluctantly attending a family dinner after Amanda's persistent invitations. She listened skeptically as Amanda and I discussed plans for a scholarship program for employees' children. "That sounds like throwing money away," she commented. "What's the ROI? Not everything valuable can be measured in dollars," I responded. "Some returns are measured in lives improved." "That's naive," she argued, but without her usual dismissiveness. "Is it? Your fashion line employs how many people now?" 27, she answered, surprised by the question. "And do you know their names? Their circumstances? What having stable employment means to their families?" Her silence was answer enough. "Business isn't just transactions, Sophia. It's relationships. People committing their time and talent to a shared purpose. That's what made your mother's company successful, not just clever acquisitions." 2 days later, Sophia called with questions about establishing better benefits for her employees and creating an internship program for underprivileged students interested in fashion. Small steps, but in the right direction. Thomas remained the holdout, exhausting legal options before finally requesting a meeting 3 months after Martha's death. He arrived at my office looking tired, but no less determined. "I still think what Mother did was manipulative, and what you're doing is wrong-headed," he began. "But I'm prepared to work within the structure she created, provided we can establish clear parameters." It wasn't reconciliation, but it was acknowledgement of reality. "I'm willing to consider any proposal that honors your mother's legacy while building for the future," I offered. "I need autonomy in operations," he countered. "With appropriate oversight and adherence to core values," I responded. We negotiated for 3 hours, finding a framework that neither of us loved, but both could accept. As Thomas prepared to leave, he paused at the door. "She always said you were her moral compass," he admitted reluctantly. that when she got too focused on the next deal, you reminded her why she was building in the first place. It was the closest thing to a compliment he had offered in years. Your mother was brilliant at business, I told him. But what made her extraordinary was that she never forgot business exists to serve people, not the other way around. He nodded once, not in agreement but in acknowledgement, before leaving. That evening, for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope that Martha's final plan might actually succeed. 6 months after Martha's passing, Williams' development group had transformed under my reluctant leadership. The aggressive expansion Thomas had planned was moderated into sustainable growth. Community programs received renewed funding. Long-serving employees were recognized and rewarded, rather than pushed aside for younger, cheaper talent. Thomas still chafed at the oversight, but gradually came to appreciate the employee loyalty it generated. His natural business acumen, tempered by ethical constraints, proved even more effective than his previous cutthroat approach. Projects completed on time and under budget when teams felt valued rather than exploited. Sophia began bringing her design sensibility to company properties, suggesting renovations that respected historical character while adding modern functionality. She established a mentorship program, pairing experienced craftspeople with disadvantaged youth, interested in construction and design, inadvertently building a bridge between my former world and hers. Amanda surprised us all by taking genuine interest in the charitable foundation Martha had established, but never fully developed. She combined her communications background with newfound purpose, articulating the foundation's mission and expanding its impact throughout Boston's underserved communities. I found unexpected satisfaction in continuing Martha's business legacy, applying the practical knowledge I'd gained over decades of construction work to development projects. I renovated the company headquarters to include a daycare center named after Martha, allowing employees to work without worrying about childcare. The scholarship program for employees' children that Amanda and I had discussed became reality, already supporting 15 students through college. My personal healing came more slowly. I joined a grief support group at the suggestion of Marion, whose position I had not only preserved but elevated. There, among others who understood profound loss, I could speak honestly about both the joy of my decades with Martha and the pain of watching our family fracture. I reconnected with old friends I had neglected during Martha's illness, finding comfort in reminiscing about simpler times. I even resumed volunteer work with Habitat for Humanity, finding peace in the familiar rhythm of building something tangible and meaningful with my hands. One evening, about 8 months after Martha's death, I was sorting through old family photos in the study when Amanda found me surrounded by memories spread across the floor. "What are you doing?" she asked, sitting cross-legged beside me. "Trying to remember when things changed," I admitted. "When you kids started seeing only the money and not the love behind it." Amanda picked up a photo of herself at about 10 years old, sitting on my shoulders at a Red Sox game, her face painted with team colors. "I remember this day," she said softly. "You bought me hot chocolate even though it was summer because I said I was cold. Mom was supposed to come but had a last-minute meeting." She hated missing those moments, I told her. She kept a calendar of everything she missed, thinking she'd make it up somehow. "Really?" Amanda looked surprised. She always seemed so focused on work, because she thought that was how she showed love, providing opportunities she never had. She didn't realize presence matters more than presence. Amanda was quiet for a long moment. "I'm sorry, Dad," she finally said, tears welling in her eyes. "For how I treated you, for how I treated Mom when she was sick, for taking everything for granted." I put my arm around her shoulders. This daughter who suddenly seemed more like the child I had raised than the stranger she had become. "Your mother believed you could find your way back," I told her. "She never gave up on any of you. Is that why she did it? The whole trust thing? She wanted to give you a chance to become the people she knew you could be, even if it meant seeming cruel in the process." Over the next few weeks, I had similar conversations with Sophia, who admitted she had used material acquisition to compensate for the emotional connection she felt was missing in our family. Even Thomas eventually opened up, acknowledging that his drive to expand the business stemmed partly from wanting his mother's approval and attention. Nearly a year after Martha's passing, I organized a small, private memorial service at Jamaica Pond, where our family story had begun. To my surprise, all three children attended, bringing flowers and memories rather than business agendas. We shared stories about Martha that had nothing to do with business success. Her terrible singing voice she inflicted on us during road trips, her competitive board game strategy that took no prisoners, her absolute conviction that ice cream was an acceptable dinner in emergency situations. Thomas had sent flowers but declined to attend, claiming a business commitment. However, as we were leaving, I spotted him sitting alone on our favorite bench, looking out over the water. I approached slowly, giving him time to leave if he wished. Instead, he moved slightly, making room for me to sit. We sat in silence for several minutes before he spoke. "I keep thinking about something Mom told me once," he said, eyes fixed on the horizon. "I was complaining about a competitor who'd won a bid we wanted, and she said, 'Success isn't just about what you achieve, Thomas. It's also about how you achieve it.'" She believed that. I confirmed. Even when business pressures sometimes pushed her to compromise. "I thought she was being sentimental," he admitted. "Now I wonder if she was trying to warn me about becoming what I've become. It's never too late to choose a different path, isn't it? The trust you control expires when, exactly?" "It doesn't," I said. "But that's not the point, Thomas. I don't want to control you or your sisters. I want to help you find what your mother and I somehow failed to give you. The understanding that wealth without purpose is poverty of the worst kind." He didn't respond, but he didn't leave either. We sat together watching the sunset reflect on the pond's surface, the first peaceful moment between us in years. Later that evening, I visited Martha's grave alone, bringing her favorite yellow roses and updates on the family business. "They're trying, Martha," I told her granite marker. "Each in their own way, at their own pace. You were right to trust that they could find their way back." As I stood to leave, I added, "And you were right about me too. I found strength I didn't know I had." The year following Martha's death taught me the most profound lesson of my life. True wealth has nothing to do with bank accounts or property deeds. True wealth is found in relationships built on respect and integrity. It's measured in moments of connection, in values passed from one generation to the next, in the legacy of how we treat others along our journey. Martha's final gift wasn't the control of a business empire. It was the opportunity to help our children rediscover what really matters before they lost themselves completely in the pursuit of more. The dusty envelope, now framed on my office wall, contained something far more valuable than any inheritance: the chance for our family to heal, to remember who we were beneath the trappings of success, and to become the people Martha always believed we could be. What do you think about Jacob's story? Has anyone in your family ever had to make a difficult decision to help someone they love find their way back to what really matters? If this story touched you, please subscribe and share it with someone who might need to hear that true wealth isn't measured in dollars. And remember, sometimes the smallest packages contain the most valuable gifts. Thank you for listening, and may you recognize the true riches in your own life.